Your first album with the band comes out in 1994 called In the Trees. There's three singles, two of them Boneyard Tree and All Uncovered, become kind of signature songs for the band. All Uncovered is a top 5 hit. The album goes platinum. This is a big deal, man, right out of the gate after
Hmm.
joining the band. What thoughts, memories, emotions come to you now when you think back to that album that really kickstarted this entire journey you've been on since then?
It was a very different time then. It was a time of much music and advertising, videos, billboards, all that stuff. I remember about a year into that, I'd turn on Much Music and I'd see the Watchmen video, or to be a Sam the Record Man ad featuring the Watchmen. I'd turn on the radio and CFNY and Q107 were both playing the hell out of the Watchmen. I played concerts all the time with the Watchmen. I drive down the QEW and there was like the big billboards on the side of the route with the Watchmen. I remember at one point thinking, Jesus, this is crazy. Like, how did this happen that it's just everywhere? Now, that was also completely unbalanced with the heavy weight of touring that we went into. That album came out and it went sort of immediately into charting. And I think it was the better part of 22 months that we toured before we had a real break. But then when the real break came, it was also like, okay, guys, the cycle is done. What a great run. Where's the next record? And we're all like, can we take a breather? So, and that's just kind of the story of how that thing takes off and how it, I don't know. It's really hard to explain that period of time. There's a part of me that was so happy that I was with a successful Canadian band. There was a part of me that was indulging my, fuck all yous to everybody who told me that I couldn't do this. There was a part of me that was trying not to believe in the sensationalism of it all, but there was another part of me that wanted to embrace it because it's what I'd always dreamed of. And there was a part of me that was realizing what a Canadian musician meant to be. And it wasn't what I had thought, the glamour and the ritz of it all wasn't there. So there was also the adjustment to the fact that, yes, there's a lot of money circulating around. You hear of bands signing multi-million-dollar record deals, but like the band doesn't get that money. Like that multi-million dollars goes to paying for the record and the advertising and the billboards and the radio ads and this and the other thing. And then the band has to pay it back. And usually the band doesn't pay it back. So they end off in a, unrecouped situation, which is a whole other side of the business. But I was just learning all this, and this was my first time coming to terms with, sitting at a table renegotiating management and record deals with tons of lawyers and stacks of paper and with the band. And I'm like, oh my God, what is this? Meanwhile, I'm getting used to touring. I'm getting used to being away from home. I'm getting used to navigating a relationship with Allison, who's still my wife to today. Navigating the waters of all that. It was an unbelievable time. Plus being around my heroes, being sharing stages with people that I'd had on hero worship mode for most of my life. Suddenly, I was doing shows with them. It was just and learning how to be cool through all that.
Did you ever figure out how to be cool? Any tips for the rest of us peasants?
I think I don't think I ever figured it out. I think I just stopped trying really early on.
I think it's when you stop trying, that's when you become cool, right? You just
It
become
could very
authentic
well be.
finally.
It could very well be. It's yeah, you being in the music business and touring and seeing it all. It's amazing the different characters and the depth of characters that you see coming out of the woodwork. You can always tell the people that have just gotten dressed up for something, and then you can also tell the people that just kind of grabbed whatever was on the floor and put it on.
Still talking about the album In the Trees. This was recorded at Metalworks, I believe.
Yeah.
So I'm from Ottawa. I moved to the GTA for 11 years. And for 7 of those years, I was at Metalworks. So this is way past when you guys had recorded there. Any memories from recording at Metalworks?
There was no restaurants around there.
Not yet, I guess. Now there are.
No, it was hard to find food. I remember that. Um, No, I mean memories. I remember making the record and being amazed at the process. You know, that huge room in the back with all the Triumph stage gear in it. I remember setting up the drum kits back there and doing all kinds of weird things to get them to sound certain ways. Working with Doug Olson was a massive treat. Incredible guy to work with. Um, yeah, it was, again, it was an exciting time. It was making a record in a professional studio with a big budget and, like, you know, microphones that I'd only dreamed of seeing. And, you know, for the first time being in a room with like all of these compressors and EQs and preamps and all this stuff that I didn't even know about, you know, was fascinating. It was absolutely wonderful.
Yeah, when you realize there are mics that are like $30,000, it kind of shifts your perspective on everything. So
Absolutely.
yeah, I was going to ask you. I don't know if before the Watchmen your bands had received any radio play, but for sure with the Watchmen being a staple on radio, do you remember the first time hearing your music with the Watchmen on the radio, and what was that experience like?
You know, I seem to think everything was shot in advance and everything was done in advance. I seem to remember shooting the Boneyard Tree video in Orangeville, Ontario. And I remember being up there, and I seem to remember everybody getting called over to the van because they were playing a track from the album and they were talking about it. And I think that was the first time that we'd heard anything from that album. I seem to remember that. I have a weird memory of it now. Whether it's sort of something I dreamt or if it's real, I don't know. Prior to that had been a little bit of CIUT in Toronto. Had played a little bit of Growl and Bone Decent and some of the other bands that I've been with. But yeah, that was my first time. But of course, it was also like CFNY. They really championed the Watchmen, and it was not much. From that first time out in the field that I heard it to the 100th time I heard it was a pretty short gap of time. It seemed like it started and there was no pickup. It just started and went. It was very, very interesting. Very interesting.
So you have such a clean and crisp bass sound on that album. Songs like 34 Dead Street and Lusitana, is that how you pronounce that? Lusitana. Yep. There's some cool bass riffs on those songs. For our gearheads, are you able to share how you achieve that signature sound? So maybe the bass, the amp, the pedal that you're using?
Yeah, I had a 78 jazz bass at the time, which was beautiful. And it had EMG pickups in it. And I would play it, everything wide open. Song like Lusitana and All Uncovered, those are chordal pick songs. So the trick to those songs is really to get a jazz bass, find the right pick position where you get that really bright sound. It needs to be brand new strings. I mean, with the Watchmen, even now, I change my strings every show, just because there's a couple songs where I need that sound from it. And if you don't have brand new strings, you won't get that sound. It's that really clear piano ringing type sound. Lusitana was actually played on a Larrivee that I had with a mahogany fretboard, I believe. Again, EMG pickups. The EMG pickups are a big part of the sound. So everything wide open. Don't fuck with the EQ or the tone on the bass at all. Wide open, pick, brand new strings, and then plug it into an Ampeg SVT. The SVT Pro series are all right. The Pro 2 is my favorite out of them. But the SVT Classic, if you can get one of the classic heads with the silver front, again, the trick to those those were brand new tubes. The amp was retubed and rebiased before we started recording. You're looking at $500 worth of tubes and rebiasing, just to get that amp to really, really cook the way you want it to. And that's the essence of the bass sound. And what I learned from working with Doug Olson, he taught me, he referred to it as hair. He'd say, you want that hair on the bass, because he'd record sort of a couple different channels of bass, direct and mic, and different mics, and then he'd play them back for him. And I'd say, it doesn't sound right. It sounds like sort of, some of it sounds clear and low, and other stuff sounds like distorted and weird. And he'd say, yeah, but watch now. And he'd put in the guitars, and all of a sudden, all that grossness would disappear, and this bass tone would cut through like this. And then the rest of it would just sort of become part of the guitar. And I was just like, what'd you just do? He's like, and that was when I started to learn about sort of overlapping sounds and frequencies in the spectrum and masking and stuff like that.
He was a sonic scientist, that guy.
He really is, yeah, and a fucking genius of a guy. He used to sit for a hobby. He'd do like linear math, linear algebra, and shit. But yeah, no, he taught me about the tone and how to make it sit, and that, you know, the SVT, you know, a P bass into an SVT or a jazz. I've been since using a PJ combo, and that's what I've been using now for the better part of 25 years, I guess, as one of my main basses.